you are going to come into my space. And that is so exciting for me because sometimes I just sit here and look around and say, I wonder what they'd like to see. And lately, truth told, people have been asking me just that. How did you get to be a puppeteer? Where do you get your stories from? So I thought maybe if you wouldn't mind going on a little bit of a journey, we're going to do that. I'm going to walk you around my studio, introduce you to some characters, but more, and then we're going to actually build a few, and I'll tell you a story. So that's really exciting for me. I hope it will be equally exciting and educational. In case you didn't know, this is national, maybe it's international, Mentor Month. So I'm also going to introduce you to some of my mentors along our way. Mentors are people that help us, to guide us, or friends sometimes. Sometimes you don't even know them. So that is where we are about to be off to today. So behind me, you will see some of my characters just hanging around. One of the questions that lots of kiddos, adults too, ask me is, how many puppets do you have? Here's the story. I have no idea. I think I have 300 different characters. Some of them I use more than one way, and some of them change costumes, so they are my actors. After our guided tour, would that I could give you milk and cookies, but you'll have to do that on your own. I'm going to make a couple of characters, and I'm going to tell you a story that was written by Hans Christian Andersen. He is one of my favorite story givers. I would like to call him a story giver. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stand up. I'm going to pick you all up, give you a great big virtual hug. I'm going to do something I'm hoping works and turn you around. Here we are. So here we are. Here's the door. Now, that's a little bit of a giveaway. What does that mean? I have two doors. So this is the door to the great outside. You can see that because the sun is shining. So let's pretend you came into my studio and I said, welcome to my studio. This is where I work. And that would be, oh, here you go. There you are. So some of this is just memorabilia, things that people have given me. This is a show that my son wrote for. It's called The Regular Show. And this is one of my particular heroes, Jim Henson. They made a stamp of the Muppets, so I had to have that, right? I'm a puppeteer. Down here we have a big old pile of puppets that I just like to have around in case I want to reach in and grab one. Every single one of them has been used in a story. Over here, of course, we have all the things that I like to look at and say, whoa, I remember that. Things that people give me that make me smile. And we're going to stop right here. This is one of my mentors. For those of you who are about my age or a little bit younger, this is Bert Tillstrom, and he wrote a show called Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And there is Kukla and Ollie, and a letter he wrote me. You know, he wrote it to me because it says, Dear Marilyn. And then over here is a trunk full of puppets. And I actually took one out, so you can see it. This is a book I wrote of the Hebrew alphabet. That is a letter, Resh and R. And, oh, that's my boy in a box over there. Now here is where a lot of it happens. So you can see the standard equipment. Oh, except for the king's crown over there. That's not standard for most people. And markers and all those things. And I just sit here and grab my puppets and do my thing. So we're going to come back for those characters because we're going to use them. Up here, we have, oops, excuse me. Oops, what happened to us? Brief commercial break there. Here we have some of the characters I've used. And there is Max and a wild thing hiding behind him. And right over here, we have the ever popular rock band. And like every good studio, just in case there's a mess up, we have paper towel. So I'm going to go above the light so we don't hurt your eyes. And what have we here? Here's some others that I've saved to collect from other countries. So photo montage. That just means a whole bunch of pictures of puppets. And here's a puppet I made of a really good buddy of mine who helped me out a lot. And this is one of the things he told me to do. He said, Marilyn, you have to rehearse. So here's the truth, which I like to tell you. Rehearsing can sometimes be tedious. It's kind of like doing your homework. No, it's not kind of like, it's doing your homework. So I sit and rehearse all my shows. I walked around the stage with you today just so that it would be terrific. Another place I get a lot of inspiration. So that's Joe. He was a puppet. Some other characters you may see. Oh, right down here, you may recognize this character here. That's called me, and I'm on a spoon, which makes great puppets to be on a spoon. And I get my inspiration too from live theater. And this little elephant there, that is one of my toys when I was a kid. Over here, oh, remember him. Let's see, can we get him? Ooh, we'll get him. He's too small, but get him a nice close up. This is a string puppet, ladies and gentlemen. And why do we call them that? Yeah, because they're on strings. So he's a pretty simple string puppet to use. He's only got 4 strings. I have no chance of tangling him. Now we're going to sneak back behind all these dudes and visit the king. This is Babar the Elephant. You know where that story. If you don't know those stories, those are lovely stories. And this is the old lady who was Babar the Elephant's mentor. Even characters in books have mentors, especially characters in books. So here's one you might want to think about making too. It is a paper tube made into an elephant. Just a snip here and there will do the job. So let's go back here. We're traveling to Mexico where they make astounding puppets. They're very nice string puppets, and I particularly love her. She was brought to me. People bring me puppets. Isn't that a great gift for a puppeteer? Right here, I'll start at the top. This is a much more complicated string puppet. I am proud to say that I made him, and he is from a story called The Dancing Man. You can see that he's got shoes. He doesn't have his shoes on. That's part of the story. And he has, let's see, 12 strings. And it took me about a week to make him. And if he tangles, that's a heck of a mess. All right. Now, what I didn't show you are the books. We'll get to that in a minute because every story I tell, unless I make it up, has a book already about it. So maybe you recognize this fine woman here. That is Streganana, Grandma Witch, and she is made out of a pasta box. And the whole story takes place out of a pot, a pasta pot. And over here is our good old big Anthony, who is always making trouble of one kind and another. Sitting right next to them, you will find books by the author Tommy DiPiola, the author who wrote Striganana. Love that author. So I keep all of those books here. Next to those are another, right next to the cat, I'll be right with you, cat, is Patricia Palaccia, who wrote beautiful stories, of which I will tell you one day. And, oh, here's the cat. Hi, cat. Nice cat. Cat is also a string puppet that took me another whole week to make. And he has only been used in one story so far, but we're always scheming and dreaming to tell him. So he's from Peter and the Wolf, where the cat has a very wonderful story about him and a piece of music that is remarkable. So who is riding the cat? Doesn't that look like a good ride? This little baby onesie was given to me by my mommy for my little boy. And he wore it and wore it. If you look carefully, and I'm not going to do that for you, you can even see some of the spots. But I did not have the heart to throw it out. So I made a puppet out of him. And he's a fun puppet to use because he's got this really squeaky, squirrely face. They are riding on top of recyclable material. Some people call them garbage. I call them recyclable material. It sounds so much fancier. This string puppet here, just in case you want to know, is called a suitcase, I think that's its name, string, and that means he just walks along. He looks like he walks along on his own. And over here we have a basket of treats. That is a grumpy bear that is still sleeping. He's also made, as you can see, out of a baby suit that belonged to my little girl. And next to them is, of course, my good friend, Mrs. Goose. Honk, honk. How you doing, Mrs. Goose? And her baby. They aren't up yet. Here actually is a puppet of me made out of one of my favorite things, Salerno butter cookies. I'm not sure they even make them anymore, but I sure ate a lot of them when I was a kid, and they make great puppets. Now, we're going to do, that's a poetry book written by my friend Shelley. We used to go around to bookstores and tell poetry. You can do poetry and puppets. They work really well together. And over here is Bluma, who you can tell is blue. She's reading a book. Actually, she is in that book. So that's cool. And here's a couple of collectibles. That is Charlie Chaplin, also a string puppet. And sneaking up right behind him is a very familiar puppet character called Pinocchio. Pinocchio is the star, so to speak, of a story called Pinocchio, about a toy maker who wants his puppet to come to life. So he'll have a little boy and all the adventures. Now, this one here is a really interesting puppet I'd like you to meet. He is Italian, and he's a tiny oh, she's right next to my space girl. She's hanging upside down. He's a warrior, and in Italy, these puppets are usually about 5 or 6 feet tall. And you can tell that he is not, but he's made of metal, and he is kind of an odd configuration. He's not a string puppet, he's got a rod puppet. And here are my hang-arounders. Mr. Punch from England, which I use to tell stories. I know they look kind of funny, and I suppose I could flip it for you, but this is actually how they hang. It's how we hang here in my puppet studio. And when I need them, I just swoop my hand in, and they're there. So let's just go down here before I take you home. This is another Bluma, oddly enough, and I made her for the opening of Bloomingdale's Chicago, and she and I walked to the store. Good news about that was my hands were so busy I couldn't do any shopping. And over here, it's a beautiful Native American or American Indian tale, depending on what you call it, is called The Raven. And The Raven is a story about, where is he? The Raven, he's right here. Who's a wonderful, mysterious folk tale. Now I've told this for you guys, it's the caps for sale. Now we're going to just step back to show you all this inspiration we have here. These are books. Ooh, right down there is another pot of puppets. All different kinds of books. And when I'm thinking about what I'm going to tell for you or just about anyone, I come here and I take a book, find me a comfy seat, look at it, see if I have a puppet. I think it's only fair then to show you this mess here. These are things that will be or are puppets. And they're pretty much everywhere. I won't get you dizzy here. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to walk over here. Sorry about the light. This is a stage where I tell from. That's Guaradiva. And I like a little background every once in a while. So I like the sun and the moon up at the same time. Makes me focus on the day. Another desk for writing and more stuff. So I am going to flip you around. I'm going to carefully go over here and pick up these and take them to be made. Then I'm going to, oh, look at that mess. See, I believe that a studio should be a little messy so that we can not worry about getting it messy when we get to work. So I'm going to put this down here and switch you around to me. There, sorry. Hi, here I am. So glad to see you. So here's what I thought we'd do. We're going to tell a story well, I'm going to tell it to you. It's a little bit different than the original version because the original version was very adultish. What does that mean, adultish? It has some high drama, you know, and I wasn't sure whether you'd want to hear that. And I'm also going to tell it in a much more tellable way. And it was written by Hans Christian Andersen. He wrote it, I think he wrote it because when he was 7 years old, his daddy, whose name was Hans Hans Christian, no, Hans Andersen, he didn't have the Christian part in his name yet. He made him a puppet theater. Now, I knew that because I read about it in one of my books. So Hans Christian Andersen's father, Hans, made him a puppet theater so that he could do puppet shows. And I'm pretty sure that helped inspire him to be the storyteller that he was. And he loved kids too. So I'm going to make just a couple of the characters so that it'll give our story a little bit more reason, more excitement. Not a lot, just a few. I'm going to make them in a kind of a funny way because rather than decorate them, I'll do that later, or maybe you will. I'm going to give them the names of the kinds of puppets they're going to be. First, I'm going to draw a little face on it and tell you the beginnings of the story. Also want you to get ready because there's some movement in the story. It takes place on a train, oddly enough. And although we're not on a train, we can pretend to be on a train. Trains generally make the body move. It's not like the wheels on a bus, for those of you who know that oldie but goodie. Trains do have a little rhythm to them. So this is a story about a man who tells the story. He's telling the story through the eyes of a man he meets on the train. And the man he meets on the train is called a puppet showman. Is that better? That's better. It's darker. So I'm going to just I think I'll make 4 characters. And I'll tell you who they're going to be. The puppet showman will be played by me. And the narrator is just going to start our story. And he'll be telling it to you through the voice of the puppet showman. So in our story, we need a cast of characters. For those of you who understand theater, cast of characters, all the folks that are in the story. So in our story, in our classic tale that the puppet showman likes to tell, we have a ballerina. She is a prima ballerina. What does that mean? Prima means first. And she's very full of herself. Even in the story. I'm going to probably spell this wrong. And that's okay. I'll just pretend it's puppetish. That is definitely wrong. But you get the idea. That is a ballerina. Okay. Also in our story, we have the leading man. The leading man is the star of the show, or so he likes to think. Now, between you and me, this one I got right. Between you and me, the real heroes of a puppet show are not the puppets, right? No, they're the puppeteer, which is why I love to be a puppeteer. Okay, so let's see. Oh yes, this is is she a debutante? She's the sweet young thing. She is going to be the sweet young thing, and that is her job. I'm only going to name her this way so that, and then when we have time, maybe thing. Should I call her thing? Yes. This story takes place in Norway, so I don't speak the language. Oh yes, and every story needs one of these. The villain. Oh yes. And in classic villain stories, I'm going to give him a mustache. The villain. Okay. All right. You ready for our story? Do you have your ticket for the train? You don't? Okay, let me get you one. Here's your ticket. Great. When the conductor comes by, you have to show it to him. I was taking a trip across the country, and I looked across the aisle, and I saw a man who looked so happy. He had a smile on his face, but the smile was not just on his face. It went deep down inside of him. And I couldn't help it. And I said to him, I don't know what you do, but you look so happy. What is it that makes you happy? And this gentleman looked at me and said, Oh, I am happier today than I have been for a very long time. And it just happened. And if you have the time, I'd like to tell you. And so I said, Well, I'd love to hear. It's not everyone that is always quite so happy. So I sat back on this very long train ride and listened to this story, which I'd like to tell to you. It seems that my companion was a puppeteer. So the puppeteer tells me this. I was taking my puppets and traveling from city to city, often on the train and sometimes on the carriage. I'd get to the town and I'd set up my show and I would tell my stories. Many of my stories took the same usual plot. Some were classics, but they usually involved one bad guy and one sweet young thing. And they would interact with each other. And then, of course, someone would save the day. I love to tell my puppet stories. Afterwards, I was usually quite tired and would wait ready to go for a drink. In this, after all, I am well over 21. In this particular day, I looked out after putting all my puppets in their bag, and I looked out and there was a man wearing a suit and a tie. He was not accompanied by a child or even a partner, and he seemed to be quite taken with my show. So I said, Oh, how do you do? I'm the puppet showman. And you? Oh, I'm a professor. I teach the sciences. Really? That's so fascinating. I've always wanted to learn about the sciences. He said, Well, then come. I'm teaching a class. And so I did go. I went to his class. I was totally amazed. He talked about things that I never heard of and how they worked. It was astonishing. My head was so filled with new information, it was as if it would pop. I went home that night and I slept so peacefully, having enjoyed my program and his. And the very next day, I set up my show and I began to tell my story. This time, the ballerina and the leading man were very busy having a romantic relationship. Oh, it was such a wonderful story to tell. And I enjoyed the telling. I also enjoyed the applause. When I finished my show, I looked out. What do you know? The professor had come back for yet another story. No, adults come once, but never twice. It was quite astonishing. So, of course, what did I do but thank him for coming? I said, maybe, you would allow me to buy you a drink for being such a good audience. So he said, Why, I would like that very much. And so off we went. And we bought a bottle of wine, which is, as I said, quite fine because after all, I am well over 21, as was he. And we shared the wine and we talked about our jobs. He talked about being a scientist, how much he loved it, how he loved discoveries, how he loved trying to figure out why things worked. And I, of course, was amazed and astonished at this story. And then I told him about my job, how it pleased me to make people happy, how it pleased me to teach the art of puppetry, how he loved to create, and how I told him that I had the best job ever. Well, we argued back and forth about whose job was better, and we had one glass and then another. And then he said to me, looking very carefully, he said, Do you really have everything you want? Well, I do. I told you I love my job. I have everything I need to be perfectly content. He said, Is there any little thing that you might want? Well, every once in a while, I think about how good it would be to be the director of a real live theater. Then I wouldn't have to tell or make the puppets do what I need them to do, but I could just tell them what to do. So we began to talk about that. And pretty soon, before you know it, we had another bottle of wine and my head began to swim a little bit, but I was sure I was in control of everything. In the meantime, my new friend took all of my characters, put them in a bag, and put them on my back. And I felt as if I was beginning to fall. And I did. I fell faster and faster till I hit the ground and apparently fell fast asleep. In my dream, or perhaps it wasn't, the puppets stood up, and one by one, they came towards me. The leading man said, "Excuse me, puppeteer, showman, I would like to exit all the time, because it is when you exit that people applaud you." But wait, I'm supposed to tell you what to do. Oh, and the ballerina said, "Oh, I would like to stand on one leg all the time because it is so beautiful and delicate." I said, "Wait a minute, I'm supposed to tell you what to do." And the villain, oh, he put on his most villainous look and said, "I want to be the handsome leading man. And this time I want the sweet young thing. Oh no, you can't have me. You can't." And they began to argue back and forth and back and forth. And I said, "Stop, you're only puppets." And they came closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. And then I woke up. All my puppets were laying on the floor. Quickly, I picked them up. I put them back in their bag and I sat on it. And then I realized I had everything I needed. I had everything I wanted. I had everything that made me happy. You see, because I'm a puppeteer and I'm always in charge. Hans Christian Andersen knew that, and so do I. Be a puppeteer. Tell a story. Live happily ever after. That's the truth for today. Bye bye.